Hi folks, I'm Jack Kennedy and welcome to week 8 of Farm Tech Talk, and especially to our news and markets team that I'm joined with here today. So I'm delighted to be joined by Katrina Morrissey, our news editor, Larkin Allen, our agribiz editor, and Justin McCarthy, the overall editor of the Farmers Journal. Lads, thanks for joining us. Quick shout out before I come to you, I suppose, to our supporters, our NUA, Board BIA, MSD Animal Health and FBD for making this outside broadcast happen. So, folks, let's jump straight into it. Katrina, your front page this week is COVID related. It talks about the income crisis that's materializing, I suppose, on Irish farms as we speak. And you had a little bit of a study carried out. Talk to us.
Yeah, that's right, Jack. Thanks. We had Professor Michael Wallace from UCD do some analysis on where he sees farm incomes going as a result of coronavirus. Obviously, we've heard from revenue and we've heard from the government about the overall economy. We haven't had anyone yet quantify what's likely to happen to farm incomes. So Professor Wallace looked at two scenarios based on the price reductions that have already been seen on the beef and dairy side. And he took one scenario which he described as the more moderate scenario, where the price falls that have already been incurred would continue between here and the end of the year, and what that would do to farm incomes. And the second scenario was what he described as more severe. And obviously it is very severe because he was talking about a hit to farm incomes of almost 1 billion. However, he did tell us that the moderate scenario is probably more likely. Nonetheless, still a very big hit to farm incomes of about 570 million.
Okay, Katrina, so as you've explained, he's done two scenarios, one being, I suppose, the moderate level of reaction from the market, the other being a kind of a severe impact. Larkin, you're in this week's journal, you're talking about, I suppose, some green shoots on both maybe the dairy and the beef side of things.
Yeah, Jack, we're seeing a little bit of positivity after that initial kind of supply shock that hit the market when, I suppose, food service closed down, the closure of, fast food restaurants and regular restaurants and cafes and that kind of thing. And, prices fell sharply after that, but things have bottomed out and we're actually starting to see prices climb back a little bit. In European dairy markets this week, positives for butter, starting to creep up a little bit again, and milk powder prices have certainly flattened out. And albeit at a lower level, but they're starting to, it didn't get to that bottom of intervention levels or worst case scenario, thankfully. And maybe we're kind of starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel. Also, really positive from China this week. Their latest import figures for March, 10% increase in import volumes. That's a huge increase for China. Double-digit increase. They're the largest dairy importer in the world, and right across the board, a lot of buying of milk powders and infant formula and things that they would traditionally buy, but really strong demand for butter and cheese. And in China, most butter and cheese goes into food service, food manufacture. So again, those are little indications that the economy in China is starting to open up, restaurants are reopening, and business is getting back to normal there. So that's certainly a positive from the dairy side. Also seeing a positive as well, beef quotes are a little bit firmer this week as well in factories. That's probably a combination of a tighter cattle supply every week now that going into factories, but also kind of rumblings that our food service sector, fast food restaurants like McDonald's, Supermax, starting to look at reopening. And that's going to put a floor on the meat trade and hopefully help prices start to rise over the coming weeks.
Okay, so Justin, bring this together for me. We have Katrina and Professor Wallace with that study, I suppose, talking about a potential hit of €1 billion, give or take, on farm incomes. We have Larkin then maybe giving an update in terms of the bit of green shoots coming in dairy markets, and I suppose a slight hardening of beef prices, albeit at a very low level. I mean, for the farmer that's listening in or watching this and reading it in the journal, can you kind of bring it together in terms of, the Professor Wallace and Katrina's story and kind of Larkin's piece in terms of where we are in prices and kind of, I suppose, what you think it's going to mean for farmers in the kind of short term?
So I suppose, Jack, look, the key thing is, and we talked about this before in a previous Tech Talks, we're in an unprecedented situation. our industry has taken a major body blow in terms of the impact that the lockdown and the closure of the food service sector has had on the industry. But this is uncharted territories. We've never been here before, and I think some of what we talked about before, Jack, is actually starting to come true in relation to the green shoots that Larkin talked about. The shock that has hit our industry, and when I say the agri-food industry, has been created by regulatory restrictions that have been put on people in the face of the lockdown. It hasn't come about like previous shocks to the sector where it's been a food scare and consumption has flattened, or it hasn't come about where consumer sentiment has changed because of tighter economic situations, and that may come down the line. But really what we're dealing with here now is regulatory restrictions impacting on consumption patterns. As those restrictions actually release, we're seeing a bit of a bounce back. But I suppose the concern at this stage, and while it's positive to see beef prices moving on, cow prices up 30-40 cents a kilo since the floor that they hit when the food service sector was closed, as Larkin talks about cheese and butter prices performing well, it is very. I suppose we can take heart from the fact that as restrictions and as countries come out of lockdown, that markets are coming back, and I think that's certainly a positive for farmers. But I think what Michael Wallace does, Jack, is he really reinforces what the threat is here, and I suppose none of us can bet against that threat, and that's the real issue for farmers. As I say, we're in unprecedented times. We don't know about second waves. We don't know how long it will be before there's a vaccine to COVID, and we don't know how long it will be before there's an effective treatment. And whilst we're in that vacuum there, we're going to have a lot of uncertainty. We could have possible second waves. We could have further lockdowns. Who knows where that situation is? And I suppose what Michael does in his analysis is he actually looks at what impact that could have on farm incomes. And as Katrina says, it's between 600 and a billion euro. Just to put the scale of that impact into context, Jack, if we look back at CSO figures and look at the aggregated farm income, e.g. the operating surplus. So what did all of Irish farming generate as an operating surplus before it touched any subsidies? And typically that's between 1 and 1.5 billion euros. So in Michael's worst scenario that he outlines, it is nearly effective wipeout of the total operating surplus and leaving farmers with only their direct supports. And I suppose in one way that just shows how important these direct supports are. But look, as we report in the journal this week and the direction of travel, farmers will be well aware that the level of those supports are in continuous decline. But look, I think given the uncertainty and the volatility of where we are, I think producing the figures that Michael has and we've published in this week's paper, it certainly strengthens Minister Creed's hand next week when he goes to the EU Foreign Council meeting to look for further support from Europe in relation to supporting farm incomes. And look, that's going to be certainly probably, depending on how government formation talks take and the formation of the next cabinet, it could be Minister Creed's last farm meeting, but it will be a critically important one for farmers.
Okay, I mean, again, I suppose to follow on from what you've all been talking about, I said I'd put a call into the MD of Ornua in the UK, Bill Hunter, just to get a feel for, because the UK is so important to Ireland as an importing country. The UK is, it's so important to Ireland and it's so near. So I said we just touch base with Bill Hunter to see the reaction of what's happening in the markets and get a feel for what exactly is happening to the different brands, the Ornua brands over there, Kerrygold and Pilgrim's Choice, etc. Have a listen to what he said.
Okay, so what we've seen in the UK, probably common to other markets, is a big shift from people eating in home from eating out of home. Ornua Foods UK is a retail-focused business, so we supply only UK retailers. Ornua has some other businesses in the UK within the ingredients division, which supply the food service and business-to-business sector. They have had some adverse impact from the COVID crisis. The retail business, which I run, has we've seen significant increase in demand. There was the initial spike through panic buying that flattened down, but we're still seeing ongoing demand up between 25 and 30% over a normal level.
Right, so that's I mean, it's a fantastic story for your business, yeah, and I suppose for Irish farmers as a result of that, because there's more product required. But How are you able to manage that 25-30% increase in demand, or how are you working with that?
It hasn't been easy. The first thing we had to do was establish a way of operating safely. The safety of our staff being of paramount importance. So we put a number of measures and protocols in place on site within the factory to ensure we could operate safely. Thereafter, we moved to how do we pack a lot more product to meet the demand. And we had fantastic collaboration and cooperation with retailers to help us simplify the business. Simplifying the business has been the key to our ability to meet the increased demand. So that simplification has taken the form of reduced product ranges. So, for example, most of the retailers have cut at least half or more of the products out of their range. That has allowed us to operate much more efficiently on site and has allowed us to meet the increased level of demand.
Bill, in terms of, I suppose, the extra tonnage that's required as a result of this extra demand that you're talking about at retail level, have you done any numbers in terms of what actually that tonnage additional on top of the kind of base level, that's what it's going to be? And I suppose, has it had an impact on the kind of the Pilgrim's Choice and the Kerrygold brand specifically?
Yes, absolutely. We expect over this period from what we've supplied to date and going forward to supply several thousand tonnes above the normal level of demand. Pilgrim's Choice and the Pilgrim's Choice and Kerrygold brands have particularly benefited. Both brands are up by over 50% over the last 6 or 7 weeks since the changed buying patterns. So that's a huge success for our brands and great news for Irish dairy.
So, Lorcan, we heard from Bill there that, and obviously he's in the retail space, which is only a part of the Ornua business, but it's a very positive one. And he has seen overall impact maybe up 25-30% in terms of tonnages, but actually even higher in terms of Pilgrim Choice and Kerrygold brands, which are obviously important to Irish farmers. They get a higher return if there's more of that product sold. I mean, so how do you balance, Lorcan, that very positive picture from Bill in terms of the food retail piece with the other parts of the Ornua business in terms of the ingredients that probably are taking a little bit of a hit?
It's hard to quantify, Jack. I suppose the industry would tell us that the loss of food service and the ingredients maybe would be, outweighs the kind of benefits of, what Bill Hunter is talking about there in the increase in retail trade in the UK. But I mean, there's certain items that have done very well out of the increase in retail demand, I suppose, and butter and cheese are certainly products like that. And on the meat side, it's the opposite, where lower value cuts like mince are more in demand, and our steak demand has really suffered. But what we really need to see is that reopening of, food businesses again that are, big buyers of ingredients. We need to see the food service industry reopening again, so that full basket of goods from the dairy industry and from the meat industry can start going back out into their routes to market again, because with such a crucial part of the route to market closed down right now, it's very difficult for farmers to be getting the full value that's potentially out there in the market.
Mm. Okay, folks, I think I'm going to leave it there on that particular topic in terms of, Katrina, you led off with the Professor Wallace piece, and then we've had a good little bit of a chat, and we've talked to Bill Hunter. So we have a good feel for that piece and where it's at. And obviously it's a moving piece, and we'll come back to it. Katrina, the other big piece that you had in the news pages this week was, I suppose, the piece around pesticides and the move towards maybe more organic, this drive that's coming from the EU to make us greener and greener. Give us a flavour for kind of some of the coverage that you had on that this week.
Yeah, Jack, I suppose it's a challenge of a different kind for the agriculture as we know it. It's a report from the European Commission. It's primarily based on biodiversity and what they want to see happen between here and 2030. And as Amy Ford reports on the front page of this week's paper, they envisage a huge cut to the amount of pesticides and fertilizers that are used across Europe. They want to cut pesticides by 50%, and they want to cut fertilizers by 20%. That would have a huge income result, I suppose, on what farmers can do on their own land. And the other target that they have set is 25% of agricultural area in organic production, which is far higher than we have currently here in Ireland and in many EU countries. So I think a big challenge there all of these various reports are feeding into the next CAP. And we know already that there is a big green emphasis for the next CAP with the Green Deal and the Farm to Fork strategy. So it's really something I think that is going to influence what happens in all countries for the next CAP.
Larkin, to pick up on what Katrina has just said in terms of the further greening of Irish agriculture, again, I see a piece on the MAC curve. We did a piece on the MAC curve in terms of a limit on kind of stock numbers in the country. How does this fit with you in terms of your perspective from looking at it in terms of that whole sustainability climate piece? The MAC curve piece in terms of a limit on stock numbers, and Katrina's piece there in terms of pesticide usage down and maybe a push towards organic, etc. I mean, what are you seeing? What are you hearing?
Look, I suppose, Jack, from my perspective, the agricultural industry absolutely accepts the potency of methane as a greenhouse gas. And its impact on the climate, but it's the only sector that also captures carbon out of the atmosphere, and there's a massive knowledge gap, I think, there in terms of how much carbon are we actually sequestering as much as how much are emissions. We've been really focused on the emission side from a policy perspective and for targets, but no work has been done at all to calculate our kind of sequestration side of things. And I mean, if for farming, the challenge is that we need to be given credit for the sequestration and how much of our emissions does that offset, and then that leaves you with a net figure for emissions. And I think it's only fair. That's all farmers, I think, are asking for, is a bit of fairness, that when targets are being set for reducing emissions, that we're talking about a net figure here, not just our emissions figure, because it's a net figure. And we did some research, or we looked at some research last week from Northern Ireland, which has done a huge amount of work on carbon sequestration. And I extrapolated some of that research and those figures for Ireland here. And it's, even using really conservative figures, it's able to show that our grasslands are probably sequestering up to 9 million tons of CO2 out of the atmosphere every year. And that's enough to offset, almost 50% of all our emissions in agriculture. And it's enough to offset 80% of all the methane that our livestock industry, our livestock emits into the atmosphere. But none of that is used in our calculations. And I suppose what needs to happen really in this next government and this talk about a 7% cut in targets in emissions, that's a very ambitious target, and I think it's where the country needs to go. But there's no point in setting targets for Irish agriculture if we're not using the correct science and the correct figures for what our net emissions are.
Okay. No, I mean, it was a super piece. I meant to bring it up with you in terms of the AFB work that was done, and you reported on it and extrapolated it, as you say, and it was excellent, and it really brought that piece into perspective in terms of the sequestration piece. But Justin, you were able to stand back and see all this happening in terms of the EU piece and what's happening and what's not happening over there. You see Larkin's piece and the research and the science in terms of what's it saying. I mean, where's your head at the moment in terms of farming and how it can kind of forge a path into the next kind of 5-10 years in terms of, and you've seen the MAC curve where Teagasc are putting a limit, I suppose, effectively of stock numbers as well in the country. Where's your head in terms of balancing all that piece that's happening there at the moment?
Well, I think the primary element to talk about first, Jack, is exactly what Larkin mentioned to follow on from his comments. Farmers have absolutely no issue with tackling issues around climate change. Who's closer to the environment than a farmer that depends on the environment for his income in relation to climatic conditions, soil type, atmosphere, whatnot? And I just think that we have to stand back a little bit and look at this as to why there is such friction between environmentalists and farmers, because at the end of the day, there is much more to be gained from both parties working together. But perhaps that's a bigger picture, and perhaps the fault's not actually on the side of farmers. Standing back, Jack, and just looking at what has happened in the last few weeks and the way that farming has been thrashed about in national politics and in the national debate, and people wanting to put their hand up with words of wisdom and some cascading farmers and others presenting this utopian landscape for farmers that the environment is a win-win for farm incomes and in terms of delivering an environmental dividend. And look, in this week's editorial, I suppose we call out the Taoiseach to a certain extent in an interview last weekend, and I want to make sure I'm quoting him correctly. Ireland needs to see more ambitious climate action as an opportunity to remake agriculture. And according to the Taoiseach, that gives a much better and more secure income to farmers for diversifying. Well, what farmer would disagree with that? But what screed of evidence has the Taoiseach or anybody produced to date to show farmers that that is actually going to be the outcome of further, more ambitious climate targets? How is farmer incomes going to benefit from that? We have John Fitzgerald, Chair of the Climate Change Commission, justifying a reduction of up to 500,000 suckler cows on the basis that farmers will be better off by putting that land into forestry. We have a forestry sector at the minute, Jack, that has failed to hit any of its afforestation targets for the last 10 years. The rate of afforestation in Ireland was around 4,000 hectares last year, which the government has set a target of 10,000 hectares a year. We have forestry contractors and forest owners all over the country at the minute that can't either plant or can't actually clear fell or thin their forests because of legislation blocks and appeals. And this is the industry that's going to replace our suckler sector. And we have to get real about this, Jack. When the Taoiseach makes those comments and what they're really described as, what they can only be described as in the absence of solid economic analysis is live horse, get grass, in the sense, guys, walk over the cliff and don't worry, we'll sort things out down the line. When the Taoiseach is making those type of statements, when John Fitzgerald from the Green Party, when the European Commission all make those statements, that broad sweeping statements that farmers' incomes will be better off from diversifying, particularly away from suckler beef production. Suckler beef production is an industry that's worth €3 billion a year to the Irish economy. It employs 52,000 people full-time across the various sectors. What other industry would be expected to make such radical and fundamental changes based on what to date are only comments and conjecture? And I suppose what we're calling out on the editorial for the Taoiseach to do more or less immediately is show farmers the economic analysis and indeed the policy framework, because the policy framework will be critical here around how farmers are going to become part of the renewable and the energy sector and the environmental sector. Because to date, farmers, there has been a direct and a clear agenda within government to keep farmers out of the renewable energy sector in favour of large-scale projects through semi-state agencies rather than community-based renewables. So what we need to see the Taoiseach doing, what we need to see the Green Party doing, what we need to see the European Commission doing is producing the detailed economic analysis, impact assessment and policy framework that gives us the confidence that what the Taoiseach says, what everybody says, that more ambitious climate change will deliver better income from farmers. No farmer would have an issue with that, but show us the evidence. And as I said, Jack, in the headline in the piece, farmers are not mushrooms. They shouldn't be kept in the dark. And that's exactly what is happening here. So let's come out and show the economic analysis, impact assessment and policy framework that reinforces more ambitious climate targets will improve farmers' incomes.
Okay, folks, thanks for that. Obviously some very clear and passionate thoughts from all of you in terms of where and what you think is going to happen over the next couple of years in terms of that environmental space. We'll come back to it, no doubt. Katrina, to shoot back to you again, what I'll say is you have two related type stories. You have marts closing down or not opening up until the 9th of June or the 8th of June, sorry, early June anyway. And then you also have boatloads of cattle leaving the country on an export job. Just kind of wrap up in terms of the news piece, what kind of happened in the last week in that space in terms of the marts and the exporters?
Yeah, Jack, so we got confirmation, obviously, from the Taoiseach that the marts will not be considered for reopening until the 8th of June at the earliest, all of that being dependent on the coronavirus figures between now and then. The marts, I think, were disappointed because a lot of them had already been inspected and they were, I think, really hopeful of being opening along with some of the construction side of things on the 18th of May, but that wasn't to be. And in the meantime, as you say, live exports continue. a boat has returned from delivering Irish cattle to Algeria. There was a delay for payment. Some of those farmers had to wait a couple of days for payment. They were paid, and loading will begin for that second boat to go to Libya. And also we had cattle leave, parcels loaded cattle for Libya in the last week. So an important outlet there for farmers, important outlet in particular for those with overage bulls, over 16-month bulls, because this is a better outlet, some of them feel, than going to the factory with them. So very important to keep the trade flowing. The calf market did slow down towards the end. Demand for veal across Europe, like all food service meats, was affected by coronavirus, but we're coming towards the end of that season anyway, and hopefully the damage will have been limited.
Yeah. Justin, to come to you, we had a good discussion on this in the livestock session with Adam Woods, where he talks about his young bull strategy that has been on Tullamore Farm for the last 2 or 3 years. And we had a good chat about where is that going and where it's not going, because obviously in terms of profit, he's under pressure at the moment, no more than any other beef system, because beef prices are so low. But he's like he says, look, Adam made the point in the livestock session. He says that the factories are winning this battle in terms of the young bulls. They don't want it. They said the market spec isn't there. Where's your feel from it? Yet we have Katrina kind of saying that there's an outlet there from these African countries that are looking for meat, protein, and they're taking the old bulls, they're taking up under 30-month-old bulls. So where's the balance there in terms of farmer that's considering, he's suckling, he's considering castration, he's considering bulls, he's kind of trying to pull these different strands together in terms of what the opportunity is for him?
Jack, to put it in context of economics and something maybe that everybody will understand, moving from a bull beef system back to a steer beef system would be equivalent of you asking your dairy farmer only to put 3 clusters onto the cows. That's effectively what it is in terms of farm outputs, leaving one of the quarters dry. And look, realistically, and the Newford, the Don Meat's own farm in Newford, shows that the steer beef systems are unprofitable. This issue is not about bulls versus steers, it's about the beef price and where the beef price actually is. And I think looking long term, what we have to also factor in, Jack, is, and look, we could do a whole podcast and a tech talk on this, and perhaps we should do it at some stage. But something that hasn't gone away, and one thing that really concerns me long term for our industry, more so than COVID, believe it or not, is where Brexit is heading. And why I bring Brexit up in the context of bulls, the only market that in Europe, and one of the only markets in the world actually, that is a steer beef market is the UK. And I think given the uncertainty over the future of that UK market, we're going to have to be very careful in terms of where we go with the steer versus bull beef system. And bulls are accepted as a main meal beef production system across Europe. The UK is the only place where there is a differential. And my view on bulls is very simple versus steers. If we are going to produce steers for continental Europe, then we should be looking at a premium above the continental bull price to actually do it, because there's huge inefficiencies with steers versus bulls. And until that premium is there for the steer over the bull in continental Europe, well then farmers, it's going to be a very difficult decision for farmers to castrate animals. Now, obviously, there's different systems there, Jack, and obviously Tullamore is a complete system, and everything's brought through to beef. If we were to castrate in Tullamore, we'd probably have to lose 20-25 cows because of the grazing the steers over the following year, and overall output would fall even further than the bull beef system. So that has to be factored into account. But Jack, look, ultimately what I'm saying is all of this, bulls versus steers and whatnot, will pale into insignificance if the direction of travel continues the way it's going in relation to Brexit. And I suppose that's something that we will have to come back to for another tech talk.
When you describe it like that, Justin, it's very interesting. It's akin to the cheddar issue on the dairy side. So for a long time, cheddar as the cheese has been into the UK, has been a core market for Irish dairy farmers. But Lorcan, we're seeing a change now where they're looking for more soft cheeses, where, and it's that European market, it's that international market where they're looking for a different type of product away from cheddar, because they don't have that cheddar taste. So I mean, that differentiation of product is beginning to happen in the dairy industry, and that dilemma, whether the factories here should produce cheddar or soft cheeses, is moving, and we see the investments in mozzarella, don't we? And just talk a little bit on that, Lorcan, in terms of what what's happening here in Ireland in that space.
Yeah, I suppose, Jack, when Brexit came along, the dairy industry had a fairly stark conversation with itself and realized that its major exposure to the UK was cheddar and cheese, and you particularly the likes of Carberry, the UK was their market in terms of they produce Sunny cheddar cheese down in Ballineen, and they knew that significant changes had to happen, and so there was a twofold approach, I think, taken by the industry. Firstly, there was a lot of investment put in new types of cheese. So we saw Carberry, they're just putting the finishing touches on their mozzarella plant. Dairygold went down the route with a joint venture versus trying to do the Jarlsberg cheese, the Norwegian style cheese. Then we had Glanbia putting in a capacity for a mozzarella plant, and also Glanbia doing a joint venture with Aware, the Dutch company, for kind of softer type continental cheeses. So there's your differentiation of your product mix, and I suppose it just goes back to the versatility of milk, that you can do different things with it compared to, I suppose, beef. But the other option that they kind of looked at to diversify was new markets, and where could we send cheddar or our cheeses that outside of the UK market. And that's been really successful, I think, to date by the industry. I think credit where credit is due. We're still selling the same amount of cheese to the UK as we always have been, but the percentage of our kind of our exposure to it has lessened because we're sending a huge amount of extra cheese out to international markets. And so some of those ones that have been really successful, Japan, South Korea, we're sending a lot of cheddar out to Japan now, and we've taken a decent share in that market, and it's a high value market, willing to pay a premium for high quality cheddar like we produce in Ireland. A lot of that's because of good work done by Borbia out there to try and open up that market, but also you've seen the problems in the Australian dairy industry where there's less cheese, less cheese being produced over there, and they would have traditionally been the main supplier into Japan. So Ireland has certainly been able to take advantage of that opportunity once it presented itself. So over those, since the Brexit vote in 2016, a lot of good work has been done to diversify our cheese industry into a much more broader portfolio of markets, so that we're less reliant on that UK. At one point it was over 3/4 of our cheese went to the UK. Today it's just 50%. Still work to do, but we've made a lot of good progress in the last couple of years.
Okay, Lorcan, thanks for your thoughts on that. We've probably gone a little bit deeper into the bull beef and the cheddar piece than we would have liked, but I mean, I think a very clear thoughts and some very good information there for farmers. Katrina, maybe just to finish up with you, we have word that the ploughing is cancelled for 2020. It's a big blow to the organisers. It's a big blow to ploughmen and women all over Ireland. It's been the tractor show, it's been the fashion show, it's been the livestock show and that culminates in September every year. Where are we in terms of the thoughts on it? Is there some talk that will be behind closed doors, or what's the story?
Yeah, that's right, Jack. We understand that the ploughing competition itself, that there is a hope that will take place behind closed gates, as it were. But the spectator side of the show is cancelled. 297,000 people went to the ploughing last year. They won't be going there this year. We were due to go to County Carlow. It would have been a huge economic boost to that area and also the country as a whole. The NPA puts it at about 45 million boost to the national economy. And it's yet another victim of the coronavirus. Grass and Muck was officially cancelled, having been postponed. And the Energy and Ag event in Garteen, three events that we've only heard of, and added to the list of hundreds of other events that have been cancelled this year. I think 2020 is going to be the year that wasn't, in terms of events being cancelled. But the ploughing, I suppose, the biggest victim by far of the coronavirus.
Very unfortunate, but look at it. Says you, there's a lot more unfortunate things happening in the world, and look at it's hopefully we get back to where we were in the future. So look at, I think the discussion we've had today encapsulates a lot about what's good about your product in terms of the news stories developing on, in terms of technical piece developing on, in terms of editorializing what this means for farmers. So I think we've had a good discussion in that space, and thanks to our contributors, Katrina, Justin and Lorcan, and Bill Hunter from the MD of Ornua Foods UK. So folks, it's been good. It's been good again this week. Thanks again to our supporters, Ornua, MSD, Borbia and MSD Animal Health, Board BIA and FBD for making this piece happen with us. We'll talk to you soon again. If you're interested in the Livestock Show, tune into the Livestock Show, where we talk to Adam, Aidan and Darren about what's happening in the fields all over the country. So thanks for watching, and stay safe and safe farming.